afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Rafel, and we're streaming to you live from Smash Studios in the heart of New York City. So excited for you to join us today, and so excited for you to meet our guest. Our guest is David Dabbon. He's the dance arranger for Beetlejuice on the Broadway.
Hi, everyone.
And we have so much to do today here in the next 40 minutes or so. So we are going to get to know David a little bit and learn what he does and what a dance arranger does, and learn a little bit maybe about Beetlejuice. And we are going to actually create a dance arrangement with you.
Let's do it.
It'll be so cool. It's so much fun. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you do what you do and maybe the skills you use and what you have found helpful that you've learned in school and learned that's carried you throughout your career.
Absolutely.
So we also will have time for some questions from you to David. So start thinking of those already. You can send them to me and I'll ask David. So let's get started with Beetlejuice.
Yeah. So I think we're going to start with a clip. But let me tell you a little bit about what you're going to see. We're going to watch a video clip of the opening of Act 2 called That Beautiful Sound. And it's the point in the show where Beetlejuice and Lydia have scared everyone away, and they're living in the house, and they're enjoying scaring people. And the sound of like hearing screams and the different ways to scare people. And they're celebrating that joy. So throughout the song, you're gonna hear where the clip is actually gonna start halfway through the song, where Beetlejuice says, you know, it'd be more amazing is having more Beetlejuices. And so all these different Beetlejuices are gonna pop up, and you're gonna see them celebrating, scaring people, and then they'll continue on with the song. That beautiful sound. Let's hit it.
You know what would make all this even more awesome?
What?
More me! All we wanna do is hear that sound. All we wanna do is hear that sound. Fellas! All we wanna do is hear that sound. All we wanna do is hear that sound. Yeah! All we wanna do is hear that sound. 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 Wait, watch! Nice move, Lydia! Yes, I hear that sound! Yes, we hear that beautiful sound!
We do what's now to me. No more condescending adults hanging around.
Every groan, each wail and each moan adds up to Daddy's leaving.
Leave the hell alone. Hey, look at me.
Looking at you,
I'm finally free.
you're finally free, girl.
I was miserable, but now they all see they're out of my grave because of that shrill symphony.
And it's the sweetest noise around. That beautiful. That beautiful sound. That beautiful sound. That beautiful sound.
So fantastic. I love that. How can you not smile as you watch that number?
I every time I see it, I just keep bopping and
Oh my
smiling
gosh,
too.
so good. So let's start with you, David. So tell us, how did you get started? Where did you grow up?
Sure. So I grew up just outside of Boston in a place called Framingham, Massachusetts. And I loved doing after-school programs where I'd be doing theater. And when I was about 8 years old, 8 and 9, my sister played piano, and my mom's like, okay, David's turn to take piano. So I took piano for the first time for about 2 months, and I wouldn't practice. I would just sit at the piano writing my own music. And my mom was like, David, if you're not gonna practice more, then I'm gonna have to stop your lessons. So I wouldn't practice, but I'd just keep writing, and I would just like write, and eventually I became a self-taught pianist, and then I went to college, and I ended up switching majors. But also growing up, I took dance a lot. Having done a lot of musicals, I was always like, put into either the ensemble or a lead that needed to dance, and it came very easily to me, and I loved it. I was just curious about dance. I studied a bit with the Boston Ballet, but little did I know that like all these little things, my music knowledge, my dance knowledge, would kind of allow me to find a job that would put all those things together. But that picture that you saw, it was me as a little kid. It was from, I think it was in the third grade, or no, maybe second grade. We read a short story. It was called Harlequin and the Gift of Many Colors. And it was this, story of like 6 or 7 kids, and this boy who didn't have a costume for a festival. And he, all of his friends felt so badly that they gave him different parts of their costumes. And so together it made this one patchwork collage of all of his different friends' costumes. And that's Harlequin and the Gift of Many Colors. So I read the script. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. So I got all my friends together, and I was a little persistent, and I went to like my local video store and hair salon, and I was like, I need money. And so I created this idea of having like a raffle. And so I got them all to donate some money, that if people won the raffle, they could get these gift certificates. So I got some points together, and having read this little short story in second grade, I was like, I'm going to do this. And I wrote my first song, and and so I've just kept writing since then. But that picture was from a news article from that. And then I've always loved how music feels so emotional in stories. So I wrote a musical when I was in middle school, and I made my middle school do it. I was always very curious about things. So then when I went to college, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that I wanted to be in the world of theater. So my thought was that I was going to be a director, choreographer, that I was going to be the one, helping guide a production. But in the middle of my sophomore year of college, a teacher found out that I was playing piano and writing a lot of music and working with singers, and he said, you should go into music. And I was like, I don't think I'm a musician. I'm self-taught. He goes, no, you should go into music. I'm like, I don't think so. And then I decided to switch. Looking into it, I was like, oh, this thing's. And my mom was like, you should go into music. Throughout my life, she's always like, David, you should go into music. I've always fought it. But then all these sort of signs kept saying, go into music. So I took piano for the first time, my junior year. And, I had a very gifted piano teacher who did not understand what my background was, that I was self-taught. And so he started me on the basics, and it really changed how I thought of music. I couldn't quite, after that moment, writing music became really tricky. Playing music, it was a big hiccup for me. So when it was time for me to feel like I was done with my studies, I didn't feel like I had enough knowledge. So I was like, I need to continue learning. So I ended up getting a degree in choral music, which I knew also nothing about. But I applied for a program that I applied for an incorrect program that didn't exist anymore, and they came after me and said, David, you should look into something else. So I applied. I had to conduct a 60-person choir, which I knew nothing about conducting choirs, but the teacher really could see that I was curious and had a lot of questions about music, and he was the first one that was like, David, your background is in dance, and you're a musician, connect them, like connect, think how music and dance work together, how you feel. So even now when I'm learning music, I'll sometimes bop around, or while I'm playing I'll bop, and since then I've been able to really play and create music in a very different way than that chapter where I felt a little stuck.
So moving ahead from when you finished college and you did the choral work, and then how did you get from there to the Broadway?
Broadway is such an amazing place, and it's growing up, you just think it's this thing that you can't really reach or can't really connect to. But once you move to New York, you start to realize that it is a place, and it's and so when I moved to the city, one of my first jobs was assisting a lot of people, and I was just always interested in meeting as many people as I could, and I was also very shy. So at the same time, it was always difficult for me to people, but I knew like that was the way to do it. And I had a roommate at the time who got a job working on a national tour of Beauty and the Beast. And so she mentioned that there was another show that the company was doing, and I got hired as the conductor. And through a series of different events of like miscommunication on what the job was, I ended up leaving, conducting a national tour after a couple days, just because it wasn't the right fit for me and what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be on the road. So I was so bummed because I really wanted to have that experience of getting to travel around the country. And the first person I reached out to when I got back, I had been in touch with for a couple years, and so he asked me if I wanted to be part of a project called Sondheim on Sondheim, and I was like, yes. So I met the team, and they liked me, and I was so nervous. I remember meeting them, and I was carrying my lemonade. We went out to lunch, and I was carrying my lemonade, and I think I'm someone who's pretty together, but for some reason I just got so nervous I dropped the lemonade all over the floor. And the story is that they turned to each other and said, he just got the job. So it just goes to show, like, but I felt I was like myself, but I was also very nervous. I was like, oh, this is an amazing opportunity for me, and I don't want to blow it.
Sure.
And because I was an assistant, word had also gotten out that I orchestrate, which means that you take the music that the composer writes and you put it on different instruments. So the orchestrator, Michael Starobin, said, hey, do you want to do some of the interstitial music, which is like in between the songs, orchestration. I got to do that, and then they recorded it for the album, and the album got nominated for a Grammy. So that was kind of the beginning of my path, but I didn't know that I was going to end up going into dance arranging. So I did a lot of different things till I kind of found the right fit for me. Yeah.
So, okay, so you said, so you're the dance arranger. So what does that mean? I mean, we know what dancers do, and like you said, orchestrators.
So on that clip of Beetlejuice, my work started where they had all the clones of Beetlejuice, and then the music started, and then they're dancing. My job is to create the music that is while they're dancing. So I take the composer's work. So I'm not writing new music, but I'm reinterpreting the work. So, if we were to say that the composer were to write a melody like, let's say the melody was something like, yeah, the orchestrator might be like, okay, that is going to be on the flute, or it might be on violin. That's the orchestrator's job. But before that even happens, my job is to say, okay, I can reinterpret that. So let's say that's the whole song, that 1 second. But the director and choreographer, we want to expand it for, 5 seconds. So my job is to figure out how to do that. And we'd figure out a story that sort of matches that. So let's say, we'd come up with this later, but eventually I would come up with I took that and I embellished it, or I could reverse it, you know, and I could stretch that out in terms of longer time. You know, so my job is to take that work and then reimagine it so that it helps tell the story.
And so I never knew that this job existed, that this was a thing that someone could do. How did you, I mean, how did you get into it? How did you learn about this?
It's funny, I didn't even really know that it existed either. There's so many jobs within, I think, every industry, and theater especially too. There's so many different parts of the industry that you don't know exist until you get older and you're learning about things. But I was working on a project where there's something called copyist, where you're the person that like writes out the music and makes it look pretty so that the musicians and the cast can read the music properly. And there was a choreographer working on the show, Joanne Hunter, and I just loved how she worked. And she had heard through somebody that I was a dancer, and it was a small cast, so she walked by me the other day and she said, "I hear you're a dancer. You know, I might use you one day if I need extra body." I was like, "Yes, please." And I said, "You know, if you get the time, I'd love to go out to lunch and pick your brain more." So we started connecting, and she was telling me about a project she was working on. And I was so excited about the project. I went home and I wrote a song. And it was a dance piece, and I played it for her, and she was like, "I love this. Let's keep going." And then shortly after that, she said, "I'm about to work on a project called The Nutty Professor, and I need a dance arranger, and you seem like you're the right person for it." And it was a guy, Marvin Hamlish, who wrote the musical Chorus Line, wrote the music for that. And she said, "Have you ever dance arranged before?" I said, "No, but you know, with my dance knowledge and knowing different styles and being a composer, arranger, I love dance breaks." So that was my first experience, and I because I didn't really know much about it, my rules were I had none. Like I was like, anything goes. You know, I'm just gonna play, and then I'll figure it out as I go. And over the years, you start to figure out, oh, they're some things to more ideas on how to play things, how to research, how to create, how to edit. And it was one of the best beginning of a process. I felt very lucky to be in a place where it was very playful in being able to create, edit, have a team that was collaborative. Nothing was too precious. You know, when you're creating a work, it's really easy to say like, "This is something I made, and you know, it needs to stay this way." And when you're creating a project, there does need to be an ability to be flexible, to adjust, to say this isn't right, or we can make this better. And a lot of my work as a dance arranger is saying, how can I make this better? Even on Beetlejuice, you know, we were editing and really trying to fine tune to make the everything as solid and tight as possible.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. That's so great. So, okay, so I assume your day to day is never the same, but what would a typical day be like for you?
Typical day for me depends where we are in the process. So in a musical, you have something called pre-production, where you're doing all the creation of what the arrangements are, maybe some of the choreography, anything to figure out before the cast comes into rehearsal. So that if there's like, you know, a fun costume that needs to be created, how does that affect how the actors are moving? How does it impact everything? How does it work with the set? That number, Beautiful Sound, that we saw, a big part of that number is that there's a lot of furniture on stage. So how do you work with the choreography and furniture needing to move? So before even pre-production, my day is kind of sitting at home exploring many options. So with Beetlejuice, I would just play and I'd create, you know, my dance arrangements, and I think I created like 7 to 12 minutes of just music inspired by what Eddie Perfect, the composer lyricist, wrote for that song. And then Connor and I would take kind of what our story was, and he'd say, "Oh, I love this part, and we'd tune it together, and then I'd write a new section because that led to something new. So that's the beginning of that process. And then as the rehearsals kind of continue on, the orchestrator who I mentioned is a guy that can take the music of what I've written and what Eddie's written and put it into what the various instruments in the orchestra have, and so I'll walk through with the orchestrator, and the orchestrator will say things like, "Oh, could this be on the trumpets?" Or I'll say, you know, if there's a big kick, or you know, maybe that's going to be on the cymbal, or can you imagine that with the trumpets going pow? Different ways to think of texture. I remember that there was a song where, you know, I had put, I think I put Uzi as a cue.
Sure.
And so the orchestrator, before talking to the orchestrator, they thought it meant, you know, soft and fluid. And I actually meant like a little bit more, you know, jazzy Uzi. And so things can be interpreted differently. So having that sense of communication and really talking through things is a really huge part of the process as well.
And when you're writing at home by yourself, do you ever get up and dance?
I do. I you know, for someone who's writing the music for dance, if I can't dance to it, who else can?
Right.
So that's something I just like to do as well. Yeah, and I'll play my own music. I'll play music that inspires me to create something. Yeah, I'll even find a beat and I'll groove to that, and that'll help me. And there are many ways to do that. So that's just part of my process. And that's taken me time to figure out what my process is to create. And it's constantly evolving too.
Sure, I'm sure this process for Beetlejuice was different from other shows you've worked on.
Yeah, you know, I feel very fortunate to have been part of projects that are very collaborative, and Beetlejuice is one that was one of my favorite because of its sense of collaboration. And you know, you have everything from puppeteers to costume designers, choreographer, you know, set, lighting, dramaturgy, the writers, director. You have lighting, and in that one number, you know, there's a character that we'll talk about in a moment, but his arms get ripped off at part, and so that deals with puppetry, and that doesn't happen very often in my world, where I get to, you know, be part of a team where there's so many different elements that factor into something, and that was such a cool experience.
That's great. So we're gonna listen to a little bit more of your work right now. Which part of the song are we gonna listen to?
All right, so we're gonna listen to Beautiful Sound, and what we're gonna start with is the first minute of the song, which is, you're gonna hear the melody that Eddie Perfect wrote, and it's right after they've scared a Girl Scout out of the house, and so let's hear that melody, and then we'll stop, and then I'll talk you through the next parts. Let's go to the track.
Do you hear that sound?
That beautiful sound.
That is the sound of clean white shorts turning brown. Torture and pain, breaking a brain. A sound that says, I will never sleep well again.
The sound of a scream is music to me. A sound that says 15 years full-time therapy.
Trauma and fear, it sings in my ear. Ain't it the sweetest noise around? That beautiful sound. Ooh, someone's at the door.
Well, that's
Do you hear that sound?
So that whole beginning of that beautiful sound, you can hear it, that melody. Yeah, and he took that, and so my next part is figuring out how, once the story kind of unfolds, how to get those elements. So what we're gonna hear next is the clip that we had heard before, where Beetlejuice says, you know, welcome to, we're going to welcome all the different, you know, what would be better is cloning me. So all these, you know, characters of Beetlejuice are going to appear. And what was not on the video, but is in the show is, you know, we were brainstorming what are some ways that we can demonstrate how they scare people. So we had this idea of bringing people to the door, and what happens when you can scare people at the door. So the first one is a delivery person, and that's where the arms get ripped off of one of the Beetlejuices. Then the second one is there's a pizza delivery. Beetlejuice appears with like snakes, and then the third one is a neighbor who appears, and it's like, here, welcome to the neighborhood, here's a pie. And even on that one you can hear the idea was to play with ways of scary music. So if the music's going to go really big, I played with contrast so that we could build into it. So the music's going to get a little tinkly and light. And there's even one point where you hear a xylophone, you go blink blink, and it's like the Beetlejuice on stage like taps the neighbor on the shoulder, and then she gets a pie in her face, the pie that she brought over. And then Beetlejuice says, sort of takes over the bodies and is like, dance break, and he makes these people, and he sort of scares them through being like taking over their bodies, and they're going to do a big tap dance. And so I took the melody and I figured out how to make it. I thought of to me tap dancing was I thought of sort of old-timey dancing. So piano rags, so you'll hear the piano very featured, and then the trumpets and saxes, so it turns very jazzy. And something else too, in the very beginning of the dance break, after all the Beetlejuices appear, I took the melody before I kind of I took some playful ideas on it, and I also was sort of curious on what would it be like if it was a children's TV show. So you can kind of hear the different textures that I played with in terms of that. So let's go back to the clip at around 1:30, and yeah.
All we want to do is hear that sound. All we want to do is hear that sound. Hey, everybody. Hey, watch. There. Yeah. Yeah. Lydia, watch this. Hey, nice moves, Lydia. Ooh, somebody's at the door. All right, let's make some more people scream. Package for thee. You know overnight delivery cost extra?
What a ripoff!
Yeah! Oh, okay. Yeah.
You can hear it was wild and manic. Cool, let's keep going.
Hey, what'd you order?
Pepperoni, mushroom, and snakes.
Snakes?
Holy moly, a lot of people come to this house. Lights!
Hello? New neighbors? I brought you a pie. It's from the store. Oh, I don't see any.
Hi there! Hey, Lydia! Check this out! Dance break! You're forgetting something! Yes, I hear that sound!
That beautiful sound. Sound that means no more condescending adults hanging around.
Every groan, each wail and each moan adds up to Daddy's leaving.
You're the hell alone. The hell look at me.
Looking at you.
I'm kind of
like the doorbell was different, and there was like a slide or something.
Yeah, and that was something really fun to play with. Is having a sound designer be part of the music process as well was really zany, and helps bring out a lot of those textures.
Okay, so we're gonna create something now, right?
Let's do it.
All right.
So I was, in preparation for today, I've been thinking about like what are some ideas of songs that everybody might know. So I was thinking of "Mary Had a Little Lamb," just because everybody knows it. We could sing it. Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb, her fleece was white as snow. And so that's gonna be like our song that somebody wrote. And then we will take that and we're gonna embellish it with our dance arrangement and how we would do that. So let's come up with a story of maybe Mary is on a farm. How old is Mary?
Great. Let's say Mary is the age of some of our students, 10, maybe 10.
10, great. And maybe she's walking around with her lamb, and she sees different animals. So maybe if you're brainstorming with us, I want you to start brainstorming some animals and maybe some qualities about them. So for example,
you can send them ahead.
So like for example, cows move quite slow, so you could put like cows, and then maybe equals slow, or you could be like moo, or you could talk about like what are some other animals that we could play
like
with?
a rooster maybe, or a sheep.
Feels very very regal or proud. So maybe the music feels that
Maybe
way.
Chickens. Oh, we got Annika says chickens do a little peck sound.
A little peck, yeah. It could be like a little.
That's a good one.
I like that a lot. That'll be very funny.
A lion. That would scare me on a
Oh,
farm.
that would be. And
But
so.
I think that would take over the farm.
And what would be some things with maybe the lion?
Maybe like heavy, a little bit.
Menacing and sort of like
yes.
maybe sniffing around.
Oh, a sloth. Oh, Heather says a
sloth.
sloth on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what would the tempo be of the sloth? Would it move slow or fast?
I think slow. You gotta
Right?
go slow with
slow.
the sloth.
So maybe it's like really slow.
Oh, we got some rabbits.
Ooh,
Skittish and jumpy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's come up with some music. So
Great.
maybe Mary just sang and she's walking, and she first sees maybe she sees like the chickens. Yeah, we said they're chirpy. They're like maybe we'll put the music light. Because if it was down here, that feels a little heavy to me. But chickens feel like a little, as you said, peckish, and so like maybe so we just finished. Fleece was white as snow, and then maybe we go into like I was thinking like I'm hitting the same note, just like a peck, like.
Yeah.
So that was like the way that I was thinking. I took peckish and I was like, I'm gonna repeat it.
What about like the rooster? Like
the rooster, we could think of like proud. So I'm gonna think
around.
Space, so I'm gonna like have space within my notes maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe the lion,
The menacing. Yep.
you can hear them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And then maybe all the animals come together,
Big celebration at the end.
And they're wishing Mary a happy day. Mary had a little lamb, hey, little lamb. horse or cow or sheep or any other animal but a lamb today.
Very nice, very nice. That's awesome. I see it all on stage with costumes and everything. Before we get to your questions, which I love, so keep sending them in. Just last thing, sort of, what have you found that sort of just helped push you through this career? Like what skills, you know?
A big part of all that for me is figuring out my process, which I think is constantly changing. Getting to play is a big part of it, and keeping my mind open, saying, yes, anything is possible, I can do it. So, taking something and then researching it and then saying that doesn't work, that does work. I can do that again, having the tenacity to know that I've made the best decision and that at the end of the day, even if I made the best decision, that can still change or that it is the right decision. That the process of really editing and trial and error of saying, how many different ways can I think of a chicken, in music? We were thinking of the pecking, I would spend maybe another hour just on the chicken. So I think about, flying, and I would, or maybe that I would maybe try reversing it up, instead of doing it, the melody going down, I would try maybe going up. And I would ask questions and saying, is that the best option? And I think that's a really important thing, is like not settling and really trying to find the right things. And and sometimes when you get stuck, the best thing for me to do is just keep asking questions. And that's been a really big part of my career and my life, is just constantly asking questions. Even if I don't know the answer, just ask the questions that gets my brain going and saying,
Awesome. Okay, so we have some questions for you.
Oh, I love questions.
Great.
Talking about questions.
Questions, yes. All right, so this is the worst question, but what is your favorite musical? It's so hard to answer.
Somebody told me this answer, and I thought it was so good. The next one I'm going to work on.
Ah, there you go. I like that. Do you remember your first musical you saw?
I don't remember the first musical I saw. I remember the first musical I was in, which was Wizard of Oz.
Good one. Did you have a favorite subject in school?
That's a really amazing question. I loved so many subjects. I think I think it really depended on the teacher I was having. I loved math at times. I loved science at times. I loved history at times. I loved English. I think whatever I was seeing through, which depending on the teacher, French, really excited me, and I think it really depended on how somebody approached it and was like, here, this is why this is amazing, and what you're going to benefit from it is this. And not knowing all the answers yet, it really helped to have that sort of support of somebody that's like, this is exciting. It's like, okay, you're excited, I'm going to be excited too. So there are a lot of subjects I like based on the excitement level, I think.
And especially with all that knowledge, I'm sure it pops up at the most random times
You
where
never
you bring
know.
it back.
Oh my gosh, you never know what you're going to learn from school and then how it's going to be applied. And be like, oh my gosh, I remember that history lesson from 7th grade. Really?
Did you like Beetlejuice? Did you know of Beetlejuice before you started working on it?
I did.
Were you
I
a fan
saw it
of the
once.
movie?
I was a big fan of the movie. I didn't know it as well as other people did, but I remember seeing it as a kid, and I kind of just loved the world and the textures and the characters, and that it, to me at the time, it didn't fully make sense, but I got it emotionally, but there were also things that I really connected to, and even musically, that was something that I didn't really realize until looking back. It was such a distinctive texture and world, and so that was also fun putting that into the musical to figure out how to celebrate what that was, but also doing it for a new version of it and what that meant for us.
What I'm sure this is a tough one too, but do you have a favorite piece of music that you've created, whether it's for a show or for yourself or for a choral thing or just something different?
I don't know if I have a favorite, but one that I'm really proud of was I worked on a show called The Mysteries, which was a 6-hour play.
Oof.
I know, crazy. I still can't believe I did it. And it wasn't something I had written all the music for prior. It was we were in rehearsals and I would be writing the music the night before. So it was a very, very quick process, and I had about 20 singers that I could just write, anything for, and all these amazing things, and all these harmonies, and had different instruments. So it was very fun to kind of play with that, and I was sort of fearless because I didn't know enough of it at the time.
Oh, that's the best way to be. Yeah. Do you have a favorite part of your job, and which part is most rewarding?
Um, there are a couple different ones. I think one of my favorite days is something called a Sitz probe,
Mm-hmm.
where the orchestra plays through the music, and it's just it's the orchestra and the music team and kind of figuring out what the orchestrator had written. But then there's a day after where the cast comes in with a lot of the creative team, and everybody's in the same room with the orchestra hearing it together, and it's most thrilling because you're hearing all the different textures, and after hearing just piano, and then hearing 20 more people playing, it's pretty wild, and it's like being in the car and hearing somebody sing, and they're singing in a duet. You're like, oh, I love hearing harmony, and yeah, it's one of my favorite days.
Oh, I have so many. I have so many questions, but I'm on the last one. So, yeah, are there any shows in the past, some favorite musicals of yours that you wish you could have worked on? Anything you've heard where you've been like, ooh, that is so cool, that that arrangement or that dance break?
No, I think I think I've become in love with seeing other people's work. So I think it's not so much that I wish that I got to do it, but I think part of feeding my heart and my brain is a really huge part of staying creative. So I love falling in love with other people's work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're so excited you could be here with us in New York City. Thank you to David for
Thank
all
you
of
for
the
having
telling us all your stuff. And yes, stay tuned. We'll do another one in October 10th. We hope to see you then.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.